outside the courthouse in Los Angeles. Ben Pesta, as we said before, a good friend of ours now, a veteran criminal defense attorney, former journalist, who's helping us understand what's going on. Gives us a chance to check in again with our friend Ben Pesta, who has been kind enough and patient enough. Ben, you know how it works inside of the courtroom, especially during closing arguments here. But let's talk a little bit about what the jurors have seen and heard so far. I think one of the interesting things is, especially, you know, you and I go back a ways. I tried my first murder case in 1975, 76, and in terms of demonstrative showings and technology, I think I had a board that I put up on a tripod that I'd use a magic marker and fill in some of the details, and then I pointed to them in my closing arguments. Nowadays, it's much different and much more effective, do you think?
Oh, without question. This is a great PowerPoint presentation. Those people in the DA's office, unless they contracted this out, the DA's office has a great audio-visual team. It's thoroughly professional.
Hey, Ben, hold for 1 second. I'm going to jump back in the courtroom because the judge is still on the bench. Let's make sure we follow with what's going on there, and then, Ben, we'll be back to talk to you. Let's go in. Of course, as usually works, as we've said before, the tyranny of live television. As soon as we go back in, the judge said, all right, I'm going to step off the bench myself. So, again, a few minutes here, the break, according to Judge Fiddler, and then they'll be back with more of the closing arguments. Just a reminder for you, the judge told the jurors that they expect to take all day today and all day tomorrow for these combination of closings. Alan Jackson first, Linda Kenny Bodden for the defense, and then Pat Dixon wrapping up for the prosecution with the rebuttal portion of the closing. How about that, Ben? How about the notion of the prosecution getting the 2 bites of the apple here? Do you think it makes a significant strategic difference?
It always makes a significant difference, Jack. Unfortunately, from the defense point of view, that's just the way the rules work. The prosecution has the burden of proof, so the prosecution gets 2 bites of the apple, including the last one. The defense gets sandwiched in the middle.
It was the hardest thing for me going from being a prosecutor to a defense attorney, not having the last word to the jurors when it comes time to sum up. Alan Jackson, and again, we've said this from the beginning, a terribly impressive prosecutor. We've also said very impressive and talented defense lawyers and a marvelous judge here. So people are getting to see some really good lawyering and judging in this courtroom. Starts off with this very emotional conversation with the jurors here, and ultimately says to them, if we could all say something to Lana Clarkson, what would every one of you say? And then he answers the question for him. He said, we'd lean in, we'd whisper in our ears and in her ears, and we'd say to her, don't go. What do you think about that? Bringing the jurors into this conversation and saying to each and every one, you know what you would say to Lana Clarkson if you had that chance. What do you think?
I thought that was terribly cornball, but very effective, almost like a Four Seasons refrain. Lana, don't go. I was also surprised that part of the summation didn't draw an objection, because in fact no one was in that car, no one knew what was being said. He was arguing things that were not in evidence.
Yeah, as you know, the idea is lawyers are supposed to argue the facts and evidence. That was an interesting approach, I think, also. And my suspicion is that some other judges, if there was an objection, and again, there was not one here, so Judge Fiddler didn't have to step in, some others might say, you know what, I don't want you bringing the jurors into this conversation at all. But as you said, Ben, I thought it was enormously effective and a great way to get started by the prosecutor here. Ben, you're going to stay on with us. We're going to fit in a quick break here because they bring Ben Pesta into our conversation for a moment here. Ben, we saw the prosecutor, and this is a no-holds-barred prosecutor and closing arguments here. He's comes out firing here. One of the things he says is, you know what Phil Spector has done here? He's got a checkbook defense. Now, I've heard the expression used. I think I've used it. I've heard it used against me in cases we were trying. But it sort of grabs you when you hear that. And Alan Jackson said he's got a whole team of lawyers, and they brought in a whole team of experts, and it's almost as if the prosecutor is saying that these people are getting paid, so they'll say whatever the defense wants them to say. What do you think about that argument?
Jackson's an outstandingly aggressive prosecutor. He's taking the case right to the defense. Now, of course, the defense can counter that argument by saying that no amount of resources Phil Spector can marshal can possibly equal the resources of the state of California in the state's ability to command experts in the state's ability to command resources, law enforcement personnel, etc.
Yeah, that's a good point, and oftentimes you'll hear defense lawyers say that because the